Why can't I always want to eat like this? Again, before I understood about the cyclical whole living mentality and what was happening to me physiologically, it was, well, what's wrong with me? Like, for example, 2 days before my bleed, why can't I have a green smoothie for breakfast today and feel satisfied? I felt fine a week ago, what's wrong with me that I can't have it today? There's nothing wrong with you. Like, it's just your blood sugar is different, your insulin is behaving differently. You have a need for something that's going to ground you, we need more calories. So that green smoothie, of course, it's not going to be the thing that fills your soul today.
Welcome to the Wildflow podcast with me, Charlotte Puanto, certified cycle and feminine embodiment coach and shamanic womb guide. In this podcast, I'll share my wisdom and conversations with powerful change makers, thought leaders, and embodied teachers to invite you to live cyclically in flow with your menstrual cycle instead of fearing it, to heal menstrual shame and normalize womb wisdom and period positivity, and to step into your sovereign magnetic power to create and embody the change you desire to see in your world. Settle in to unleash your wild flow. Hormones are the intricate chemical messengers that move through our body and influence our menstrual cycle experience, our fertility, and so many aspects of our health, not just our reproductive system. And more evidence is coming forward through the science that's being done to help us to understand the connection between our lifestyles, our diets, the way we feel and think and care for ourselves, and how that influences our hormones and therefore our health. Today's guest is Giulietta Durante. She is a menstrual cycle nutritionist and period coach, inspiring women to step into their most healthy and vibrant version of themselves. Through hormone healing, cycle nourishing nutrition, and coaching, Giulietta empowers women to realign with their divine feminine power, to deepen the connection to themselves and live in harmony with their hormones and bodies for greater well-being. She compassionately guides women back to the wisdom of the womb, helping them to discover the magic of cycle syncing, honoring the courageous, sexy, and enlightened goddesses that they are. When we finally sat down to record this conversation after needing to rearrange so many times, I was actually just on the cusp of the onset of a menstrual migraine. And I was really grateful to Giulietta for her wisdom and her sharing with me in real time what is going on hormonally for me with a breastfeeding child and how that's influencing my menstrual cycle experience. It was a really powerful conversation about how we can look after our hormone health through diet, through lifestyle as well, and also through our connection and relationship to our menstrual cycle and cyclical living, to embrace that cyclical goddess within us. Giulietta, welcome to Wildflow. I'm so excited to have you here. How are you?
I'm very well. I'm excited to be here too. This has been a long time in the making. I'm just so pleased we're here now. Just so excited. Thank you.
Yeah, you're right. It has. It's been a long time. We've had to cancel a few times for various reasons and, life and things like that. But it's so, I've been so looking forward to this conversation. And so, I'm really pleased that we get to do that today. I'd love to ask you to share with us, if you're happy, just to start a cycle check-in so we can see where you're at and how that feels for you, and I'll do the same, and we can see how that lines up or doesn't.
Absolutely. So I am cycle day 4. Definitely feeling that slight shift, but I'm also an impatient menstrual cycle awareness being. So the minute I cross the day 3 barrier, I'm already like, right, I'm done. So I always have to, part of my energy at this time is being aware that I still need to honor the fact that it's day 4 and I'm not completely out of the woods yet, but I do have a bit of a lightness to me today. It's also a little bit spring-like in London, and there's that beautiful when you get the outer and the inner season sort of matching, because it's really early spring, as in the first few daffodils, which is really nice because it's really aligning with how I'm feeling today. I've been sleeping well, so that massively, massively helps. Sometimes during my bleed, my sleep can be quite funny, but sometimes this has been a really lovely grounding sleep. So I'm waking up feeling refreshed. Yes. So I think there's a little bit of impatience. There's a little bit of, I have a lot of Aries also. So if you want to bring the astrology in, I've got Aries all over the place in my chart. So I've got a lot of fire. So one of my sort of lifelong tasks is to just calm that fire down sometimes. But today the fire is really wanting to burn. So I've just got to be careful that I'm putting enough sort of wood into the fire, enough fuel, and also that it's not a completely over the top fire.
I love that. Thank you so much for sharing. I'm fascinated because so my day 4, I'm normally still bleeding quite a lot, still exhausted. It takes me like a solid 8-9 days before my energy starts to pick up. But I sleep terribly at the minute. I've got children who just wake me up all the time. Breastfeeding, one of them, she is very persistent, and it's like so interesting that just love how we can all experience our cycles so differently. So for me, I'm on day, see, this is up for debate, and I would love your take on this, right? From your perspective. So I started spotting last Friday. It's now Thursday, right? So I spotted Thursday night. So Saturday, Sunday, Monday, I reckon 4 days of spotting where it slowly started to pick up a bit, but not much. And then yesterday, it was, I would call that like a bleed, but it was dark brown and kind of thick. And then today, so all day yesterday I was having like womb cramps and lower back, like sacral cramps. And then today it's all just like the tap's turned on and it's like, boom, it's all here and it's really heavy. And it's just kind of knocked me a little bit for 6. And it's like my womb is going like squeezing, going, come on, get out. Like, I'm evicting you. Like, you're done here. Like, stop trying to hang on. It's like a relationship that's over and one party doesn't want to give it up. It's like hanging on for dear life. And yeah, so, I feel like potentially I could call it day 2 because yesterday felt like it crossed the threshold from just spotting into bleeding, and then even though it was light, and then today's heavy. What would you call that?
It is a really like difficult one to pinpoint. I try to be quite traditional because in a way we all want to have that label and that moment where you can differentiate between the spotting and day 1 and what is official bleed, because like I find that day 1 is almost like, whether you believe that's the beginning or the end of your cycle, it's like that anchor, right? So we always want to have that, where is my day 1? Because if I have day 1, I can then, I can work with everything else. And I would say, yes, definitely when you see that shift from that like spotty, browny, and I think sometimes we intuitively, we do know when it's shifted. It's almost like, okay, this feels different. And I would say if you had that feeling, that's probably where it's going to, you say it almost feels like a day 2, but obviously, you've shared with me, like, that you're still breastfeeding. And so what I would say from a hormonal point of view, your body is still not quite at that, let's just have really regular, or let's go back to what my cycles used to be, because it's receiving different information. It's like, we're not quite ready yet to maybe have another child, because essentially that's what we're always thinking about, in that deep biological sense. So the body's very much like kind of getting there, but not quite. We're sort of doing that transition, right? Because you'll still have obviously things like the oxytocin, which will send a slightly different message, and like sort of all these kind of like signals that you're still producing breast milk, which is obviously the biggest signal of we're not quite ready yet. So I think that's that transition phase, and because obviously you're doing this deep cyclical work with you, it's almost, I can imagine, it's like, come on.
It has been so interesting. I reckon, so my cycle started about a year ago, and my youngest child is 2.5, right? So
Mm-hmm.
2.5 years I've been like waited, like, you know, kind of working with my cycle, like just as it is, just accepting it for what it is, and being really present with it. But when I wasn't bleeding postpartum, I think I got to she was about a year old, and I was like, all right, come on now. Like, where is it? Like, I want this. I want to experience it. And, you know, I guess really, like, I've had 3 children, and I didn't really have many cycles between children, because they've always all breastfed a lot. And I only really came to this work when I wanted to have a baby. That's when I came off the pill and realized what a cycle was, like all this stuff. And I was probably, I think it was sort of second child-ish where I learned about, you know, inner seasons and the phases and menstrual cycle awareness. So I was really impatient to have menstrual cycles where I could really practice this and not just be living cyclically in these other ways, you know, with the earth seasons and the moon and you know, life cycles and rites of passage, but really this menstrual cycle. Yeah, there was 100% that. And now it's just kind of, I'm just letting it be, but I'm also curious from, you know, I don't ovulate every cycle. So I'm, you know, sort of like trying to track my ovulation and see what's happening there, and then noticing like how it feels for me and what's different on a cycle when I do ovulate versus when I don't, and just what it's like with such, you know, the disrupted sleep is really, and the breastfeeding is really, really knocking my cycle around for sure. So yeah, it's really interesting being with it, and I've noticed that for quite a good few cycles, I have these days of spotting before my blood starts, and like I was saying, you know, I sort of think, well, the spotting is, you know, that you don't count that as day one, but in a way, like if I can track that as day one and count how many days of spotting I have, it just helps me be aware of that spotting as well, and you know, knowing that my hormones are still out of balance, and and that it does.
And I'm
affect
just
me
curious.
In a way.
Just curious. Have you noticed a difference in the spotting from where the ovulatory cycles and the anovulatory ones? Is there a difference at all there? Is that a pattern that you've?
Yeah. So I mean, when I don't ovulate, the cycle's really long. It's about late 30s to 40-day cycles, and then I do get spotting, maybe not for as long, whereas this time I did ovulate, and then the spotting started early, as I thought. I was like, oh wow, it was like day 25 or day 26, and I was like, oh wow, is this you know, is this my bleed, is it here? And that was nearly a week ago. So we're really just getting into the blood now. So yeah, it does. But what I really notice about on a cycle when I don't ovulate, an anovulatory cycle, my PMS is through the roof. I get, you know, I don't call it PMS, but you know what we mean if we're calling it PMS, because I think PMS is such a derogatory kind of phrase, and I like to kind of, you know, think of it more in terms of like what needs are being met or not met, and what, you know, just really embracing even the darker, more challenging aspects and feelings and emotions, rather than labeling it and disconnecting from it. But I get really just a need space. I need a lot of space. I need quiet. I need to be by myself, and it can create a bit of disharmony in the household if I'm not aware of it and on top of it. And in a long cycle, it's exacerbated. Whereas in a ovulatory cycle, it's there, but it only comes in at the end. And this cycle, I noticed that I had really beautiful, it was like an Indian summer kind of like vibe. You know, my inner
Mm,
autumn just felt
mm.
really lovely. I was like, kind of still kind of floating. And I was like, oh wow. And then when I started spotting and I said to my husband, oh, I think my bleed's coming, he was like, oh, really? Like, wow. It's like before I didn't notice any, any of the usual from you this cycle. I was like, yeah, thanks, Bill. But yeah, like,
Love that.
he notices it too. Like we all notice it. Mm.
Yeah, and just a few things that came through when you were speaking. So I've seen somebody on Instagram relabel PMS as please more space.
Yes,
So I love that.
I love that. Please, one space. I'm taking that on. Yeah.
It's so good. And yeah, just as you were saying that, and then literally a second later, you said that about needing the space. And I was like, yes. So the reframe, please more space. And, this is like the classic progesterone feel, right? So if we can dig into that hormone now, because I feel this is the right place to talk about it. So when we don't ovulate, we just don't produce a progesterone peak, say
Mm.
roughly 7 days later. And progesterone is that it's kind of like the yang to estrogens, no, sorry, the yin to estrogen's yang, right? So progesterone, they work in harmony together. And if it's not, it's almost like a little blanket to hug that estrogen, it's almost like, come on, it's okay. Let's just calm down a little bit. Let's just chill a bit more. Let's just nest a bit more. And when that doesn't happen because you haven't ovulated, that's where that PMS, and I think for me, when I learned this, I was like, I get it now, like it really was actually for me a bit of a game changer, because at least then I understood that it was, took my temperature. If it didn't ovulate, I was like, okay, I'm ready, because this is going to be a slightly bumpier ride than maybe another month. And once
Mm.
you understand that, that having that little bit of knowledge, and when I explain that to so many of my clients, I'm like, oh, okay, and then we're like, okay, so what can we put in place? How can we create our own little blanket when it comes, or maybe
Oh,
it's about, we don't wrap her up. We just let her kind of go a bit wild, and just use it for whatever we need to use it. But in terms of that the hormones, it's that progesterone just hasn't peaked, and that's where you get all the slight estrogen, because estrogen will peak again a little bit later, and it's usually that moment when she comes back and she's a bit like wow, and you're like, okay, come on. So yeah, that's
yeah.
fascinating that you found that, with your cycle, because it is such a common experience.
I love that. I think, yeah, it's 100%. Somebody actually said to me recently, like, you seem quite progesterone-y. Like you seem like you're in a bit of a progesterone bubble. Like they were a cycle coach. Like they knew what they were, It wasn't just
They
somebody
knew
on
what
the
they were talking
street.
about.
But I was like, yeah, 100%. Whereas when I don't get that, like I can absolutely feel the difference. So it's something
Yeah.
that I'm a bit crap at wearing my temp drop. I have to remember to wear that
Mm,
to track my temperature. But
mm,
when I do,
mm.
it's just having that knowledge. Like you say, it just makes such a difference. Knowledge is
It
power,
really
right?
does. It
Self-compassion.
really is power,
Mm.
absolutely. And I think also, especially for women, it can happen at any point, because it's important to realize that at any life stage we can have an ovulatory cycle, so we don't
Mm.
always ovulate, but it becomes a little bit more common and a bit more regular as we move into like our mid to late 30s.
Mm.
And this is the moment that I see a lot of women going, what is wrong with me? Why am I losing my shit all the time? And it's because you're not going to just you're not going to be ovulating as regularly. So maybe in your 20s you would not ovulate once or twice a year.
Mm.
Now it's maybe once every 6 months, once every 3 months. And then for me personally, that was when I hit my turning point in my hormone
Mm.
health. I was like, I'm a crazy woman, what is wrong with me? Like, I still remember, I think it was actually my 35th birthday. My husband, bless him, we'd arranged like this lovely lunch with friends and all of this. I lost it in the middle of the lunch. I stormed off to Clapham Common. He was running behind me. I'm like, leave me alone, man. This is before I really I did hormone work, but I didn't know the cyclical implications of the hormone work. And I thought I was losing my mind. I really, really did, So when you have the knowledge, all of a sudden you still have those moments, but you're like, I know I've got this, I know what this is, rather than like, I'm losing my shit, basically.
Absolutely. And yeah, it's so, like you say, it's so important to have that awareness because, with postpartum, there are times when you're not ovulating like me, and then moving to perimenopause, and ovulation is more common. And I would love to dive more into the work you do. So you are, working in the space of hormone health and cycle nutrition coaching. And I'm wondering, do you see a lot of women who are, what point are they at when are they like in the same kind of situation as you? Like things are changing, like am I losing it? Like what is wrong with me? Like why, I'm sort of feeling like, crazy or out of control or not myself at times. And then, the work you do with hormone health, like, are you finding that, the hormones are a significant piece of the puzzle for them?
Yes. So I tend to work with women who either have been on the pill for a long time and want to come off it, or women who all of a sudden have had a shift in the hormone health and been told the pill is the only option, so there's this and they're just like, I don't want to do that. And it's, thank God that these days we do have other approaches, and actually social media is amazing for that, right? Because you'll immediately, if you're looking for this, like, what are my alternatives, you'll come across women and people doing fantastic work in this field. So I tend to be like, I've been on the pill for years, I want to come off it, but I'm scared because I haven't had a cycle in 10-20 years, sometimes even longer. Then I've been told to go on the pill, but I really, really don't want to go on it. And then there's the everything's really changed and I'm feeling very, very different in my body. I'm feeling totally out of control and I don't know what to do. So those are the kind of three main groups of women who will approach me, come to me. And the hormones are a big part of it. I mean, I think there's a really fine balance in the work I do because I'm not about feeling the same every day. I'm not about waving goodbye to all the ebbs and flows. I used to be like that. That's how I was trained, funnily enough. It was very like linear model, wake up every morning and feel the same and smash your goals and blah, 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 blah. And it never sat right with me, but I never understood what it was that was missing until I came into more like, cyclical living and understanding. Like, how crazy is it? I think about this a lot when I was studying nutrition at uni. Like, we would look at the female cycle, but we would not really look at the fact that it was a cycle. We would just look at, just the basics, like women have estrogen and blah, 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 blah. Like, so then when I started my work, I never really thought about the ebbs and flows. And I would sit there and women would come back to me and said, oh, I still had a tantrum the other day. It's not working, or I don't know what else to do. And I would just feel like shit about myself as a coach and as a nutritionist, because I'd be like, oh, I'm not getting them to where they want to get. And why are they still having these moments? And it was deeply unfulfilling and also very, I always felt like, we talked about this before we came on this podcast, but I always thought there was something wrong with me and wrong with my clients. This is a big narrative that I think a lot of anybody who has a menstrual cycle, we experience a lot. What is wrong with me? So my training was, like I said, very linear, very whatever. And I was trying to force my clients down that route. And I was always like, oh, what's wrong with me? I'm not good enough. I'm not a good nutritionist. Why? And then I came to the cyclical living part and I was like, that's why. And that really shifted things. So we do the hormone work, as in I do like deep functional testing. I do have a deep love for science and knowing what's going on at that level. But I then want to take it that step further of like, now let's build in the even deeper like connection we have with everything, like, and our cells have that connection. It's not just, this is not airy fairy. It can be beautifully spiritual, but it's actually rooted in our physiology, and that really changed things for me. So yes, hormones lie at the really heart of what I do. And there's the scientific, there's the testing, but then there's like, okay, now we know all this. Now we take you to the next level, which I think has really transformed the work I do.
Yeah, I love that so much because, I get a lot of people saying to me, they're experiencing problems with their cycle on like a health level, and that's not my area. So, I always have to say to people, like, I'm not here to fix your periods, but it's like, well, what should I have my way of working with people, but I always refer people on when I suspect that there's something going on these hormone levels. And, I personally don't refer people on to doctors because I feel like they're just going to go in and get the same thing of, here's the option and that's a contraceptive pill, or, we're going to do these testing, but it's not deep level. It's just kind of surface level. And I'm always really, really mindful of the fact that there's just not enough knowledge out there about, ways of honoring this cyclical approach to healing. And, I love what you also said there as well about, it being twofold. It's like, yes, we can do, there's X problem, so it's Y solution. We can, if we can see that there's something going on, there's a solution for it. But more than that, it's about connecting in with who you are and being at home in your body as well, isn't it? Yeah. And you talk a lot about connecting in with, the divine feminine within you. And I love that. Like, I'm all about that as well. I want to ask you, like, when did the divine feminine reveal herself to you? Who is she? Like, how do you connect with that part of you?
So she revealed herself to be very accidentally, as she normally does. I was actually looking to run a retreat. I had no idea what I was going to do. I just was like, I want to do a women's retreat. I like the sound of that. So I put it out there, and I was like in a little nutrition business coaching circle. And there was someone else there who was going to do a retreat, and her business partner had pulled out. So she's like, shall we have a meeting? I was like, yeah, why not? So we sat down, and I thought she was just going to tell me, because she'd already run one. So I thought, oh, she's just going to give me some, details. And then like halfway through the meeting, she was like, do you want to do it with me this year? And I was like, oh, yeah, why not? So we decided it was going to be in Ibiza, that beautiful island, that's just so deeply spiritual, and just like it is the place for holding a women's retreat.
Yeah.
And so yeah, we did the retreat together, and then like in preparation, we went to a few women's circles in London, because I've never done anything like this. I had now when I look back, there was this calling, but I didn't know what it was, and I was like, okay. So we started with that, and they were deeply life-changing for me. Like the connection we did this one exercise where two women, so one woman would lie out, and you had this beautiful music playing, and the other two would touch her with love, just like it was extremely intimate and extremely vulnerable, but it was beautiful because to feel that tender touch, if for those of us who are like, in a sort of like heterosexual relationship where you always really just feel the touch of a man, to feel the touch of a woman I was like, oh my God, this feels amazing. Like there was a tenderness to it that was just very, very different. And that really stayed with me. And then we did the first retreat, and my mind was blown. Like it was just like, oh my goodness, like watching the transformations, having my own transformations. Like we did all these incredible ceremonies, and oh my gosh, like it was like next level. So the first retreat was it was amazing. Like I came back and I set this intention that I would carry on connecting with my divine feminine and with others. And I did, I was having, but I had this story that London is not as spiritual. I was like, there's too many sirens going for it to be spiritual, this kind of story.
Love it.
And it's so funny. And then we did our second retreat the following year. And I think that's when she really, really landed in me. So everything else had been like preparing and opening. And then the second retreat, I had a moment when we were doing a yoni egg workshop, and I actually heard my womb talk to me, and I had this voice. And then that kind of shifted everything for me. It was a bit difficult because I was holding space for all these other women, but equally I was going through this very deep journey myself. And thankfully we had all these other like incredible women there helping me, facilitators who were like reflexologists and all sorts of like beautiful space holders who were really holding me. I'd be like, I need a session. They'd be like, come, like, and they would just hold that space for me. And I'd be like, right, this is what's happened. Like I've connected with my divine feminine. I've heard my womb speak. I don't really know what I'm doing. And they would just hold that space for me. So that was it. It was a very gradual progression, and it was just so beautiful, and just life-changing. And now it's like, I came back again and I was like, right, this time I'm setting an even deeper intention to connect with my divine feminine and with divine feminine beings around me. And that was when I went to another women's circle and I actually met some soul sisters that are like soul sisters to this very day. And like all through the pandemic, we gathered online and we did all this beautiful, I mean, we used to spend like 5 hours on a Saturday morning meditating and connecting together, like to the point where we were all like dying of hunger because we had a cup of cacao on an empty stomach, and then we were like, but it was such a beautiful connection. And I think, yes, it was never, well, I suppose that moment for me was the yoni egg when my womb very loudly spoke to me. And I also felt a lot of guilt because up until that point, I'd always been very medical in my attitude towards my womb, which was like, oh, I have 2 fibroids. Oh, I have this, I have that, and it was very much like always eating to support the fibroids, always like in a little bit of a battle with my womb space. And then that all changed because that voice I heard was so loving. I was like, wow, I am so sorry. I've never, ever spoken to you before. And that was that moment of deep connection, which really, 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 really changed everything for me. So there you go.
Oh, that's beautiful. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you.
Can I ask, what did she say to you?
She very clearly, right. So it was just so like, hello, but I can't even, I got tingles. It was the warmth of the hello and the love. There was this unconditional love because, to be honest, I had been not the nicest of people to her. You know what I mean? Like really always like forcing and pushing and all of a sudden I was like, there was this, I cannot even begin to tell you how deep that love was. And there was absolutely, it was the sensation that it was like a ripple, that came out everywhere. And I was, physically like just kind of went like this. And I can still hear that hello to today. I can, even though we've had loads of other conversations, I will never forget the deep, deep unconditional love I heard in that voice, in that hello. It was just beautiful.
How truly special. What an absolute gift. Yeah. That's so beautiful. Thank you for telling us.
Oh, thank you for letting me share.
Yeah. So I'm really hearing that your journey to meet your inner divine feminine was reflected in the divine feminine of the women around you and the experiences that guided you there. It's like you were brought into a circle. You collaborated with other women who invited you in and trusted you and wanted to co-create with you. And there was the space holding, the deep space holding when you were facilitating. So rather than being in a hierarchical, I'm the space holding and can't receive, I've just got to give, you were able to have these other women just take that for you, give that to you as well. And that sounds like it's been a real portal inwards to, like you say, receive the touch of a woman and be different, and just awakening you to sisterhood and support and that love from women, and receiving that has helped you to receive it in yourself. Is that true? Fair to say?
Yes. There's a reason why you've been voted international women's coach or whatever it was.
Thank you.
You know what you're doing.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah, it just really stands out. Yeah, to me that it's I think, part of, for me, connecting in with that with myself has absolutely been inviting other women in and healing like the sister wound, and
Yes.
experiences with other women and friends, and in the past where it's felt like there's been no trust, and that's been a real healing experience for me, to then be able to soften into myself. So I guess that's part of it as well. It's like I really resonate with your story, and it's so powerful. So how has you said about connecting into that voice in your womb, and this being an awakener to your divine feminine, and this is a relationship that you are continuing. Hearing you say too, how do you connect in with your womb now, and maintain that or deepen that relationship with your womb so that she's heard and can keep? You said you've had many other conversations.
Yeah, so I think it's sometimes it's a challenging relationship, I have to say. Sometimes things get in the way, just that kind of, we talked about this, like my internal patriarchy forces me to push when I really probably could do with slowing down. It's not the easiest relationship for me sometimes there's still the guilt there. But one of my ways of connecting is through drinking, for example, ceremonial cacao, and creating that space, and having like I'm a bit of like one of the queens of cacao in my circle. So with the soul sisters that we've met at the women's circle, I became the cacao, whatever it was. I was leading all these ceremonies. Didn't know what I was doing, but it didn't matter. It doesn't really matter, does it, when you're doing this stuff, which is just beautiful, divine feminine, just guidance and trusting. So I love to create space with like cacao ceremonies. They're important to me because having that ritual helps me, because sometimes day to day I tend to just push and just go into these like masculine, like old ways of, not old, they're current as well, so cacao for me is sacred, and in the cacao, that's where I can do the deeper work, and just create the space, because I find that my womb and my divine feminine, she needs space to be heard, and she can be very loud sometimes, but only when the space is being created. I sometimes do some yoni egg practices, or sometimes I'll just put my yoni egg under my pillow. It's not even, sometimes I'm like, oh no, I'm not quite ready for the full yoni egg, but I'll connect with the egg in some way. I find that can really help as well. Breath, lots of breath, like breathing just into the space sometimes. Obviously during my bleed, I'm always like, okay, this is a time where there's a very physical manifestation of this space now, right? I'm seeing this blood. This is a little reminder to connect in some way or other. So what I always love to do is that moment when my bleed arrives is just give a little prayer of thanks, like a really, sometimes it's not at the most convenient of times, but I'll give a little prayer of thanks and just pause in that moment. And then sometimes, when the space and the time allows it, having like the bigger bleed and doing all of things and connecting with my blood and all of that, and but it is a journey. It's not always the easiest of journeys, and there's just about anchoring in that grace and compassion, when sometimes I really wanted to have a big bleed in January and it did not work out, and I got so frustrated. And then I just had to laugh, and go, it'll happen. And actually, ironically, it happened in February when I wasn't expecting it, so it's kind of like, it's fine. And it's about a real different relationship, like a very different one. So yeah, those are all my ways of connecting. Sometimes just going out in nature, just sitting on grass or by the sea, and just like feeling that connection, or touching some kind of tree or plant, or where I spend a lot of time in Spain, and up in those mountains there's a lot of wild thyme and rosemary, so I'll literally just rub my hands and just have that connection, and then maybe feel her as well. So to be honest, it's whatever sort of I feel pulled to doing. But and then there are some times when, like, for example, I've told you about my narrative on London is not as spiritual, so here A, I've got to challenge that, and B, sometimes I have to put a bit more effort into it because, I'm like, okay, go to Regent's Park and sit in your
Mm,
bench. There are places where I can connect a bit more easily, but it's easier for me to ignore her here, and because there's a lot of other noise,
yeah.
literal noise as well.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, beautiful. So nature's something that's really grounding for you, really
Yeah.
pulls you in.
Mm.
Yeah.
Oh my
Same
gosh, yeah.
here.
Like I just crave nature
Mm,
so much. Which is one of the reasons. I mean, I've lived in London a long time, but I'm getting to that point now where I'm just like, I'm kind of done because I want to know where the moon is. I want to see the
yeah.
moon every day. And I
That's
can
so
see her, but it's
interesting.
always,
Can you?
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I can see her from here, but it's always quite cloudy here. So
Mm,
we've just got this practical issue that the clouds block the moon. So it's like, oh, where is she? Whereas, so where I live in Spain is on the top of this mountain, and you can literally see the moon all every day. You can see her rising and you can see her setting. And some mornings when I go for my morning walk, she's still out from the night before. The full moons there are just amazing. And
mm,
yeah, I just want that connection, and here, yeah, it's just not as easy. And I just really, really crave it.
mm. Do you know that's so funny because I'm from England. You know, lived there for the first 25 years of my life. And at one
Mm,
point, we lived in a ground floor flat in Birmingham and
mm,
across so actually, we were almost sub ground zero, like our apartment
yeah,
was sunken and we had
yeah.
like this window that was it. One kind of window, and you looked out and you could see people's feet walking past. You
Hmm,
couldn't see
hmm.
the sky,
Yeah,
certainly not. And
yeah.
with all the street lighting, it just wasn't a thing. And it was when I came to Australia, and 4 or 5 years ago, we left Sydney and we now live in the countryside. And we
Hmm,
have what is a real dream. We have out of our lounge window, we can see the moon rising. And we can't see the
mm,
full way, but we can see,
mm.
nearly. And it's just, I realized, I was like, I have never seen that before in my whole life until
Yeah.
I moved
Mhm,
here. I just was like, and the stars and the sky, and because there's no street lights,
mm,
it's really
mm.
rural here. It's it's astonishing, and it's amazing how much you can, it's a metaphor, isn't it? But it's amazing how much you can not notice what's right in front of you and there all along. Whether it's the sky or whether it's your body,
Yeah.
like that mindset of
Yeah.
just, you're not seeing because you're not looking, or
Yeah.
you're not you're not aware it's there,
Yeah.
and sort of speaking to you, and it's just
Mm,
it's quite amazing. Mm, yeah, so it's today I was in the garden. I've noticed this as well. When I bleed quite heavily, I go and
mm,
sit outside, bum on the ground, and I do a lot of weeding. Strange,
mm.
but there's part of my brain that's like, I can see all these weeds, and because we've had so much rain, it's like, this is ridiculous. I'm like, that
Yeah.
needs doing, and I can't leave that another moment.
Mm,
So it's
mm.
this kind of urgency almost,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
also the very act, like I refuse to wear garden gloves. I just, hands in the soil, completely caked in the
Mm,
earth. Just,
mm,
it's so therapeutic. And I let my
mhm,
kids run
mhm,
around and they just come and go, and I get a bit of
mm,
quiet, and
mm.
I just really enjoy it. Like, who'd have thought weeding would be good for the soul, but
Oh,
seems to be.
yeah. 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 Well, I mean, first of all, you've got that clearing, that cleansing sort of feel, but then that earth connection, that grounding as
Mm,
well. Yeah. Beautiful. I love
mm,
that you're doing that.
mm.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I'm gonna start tracking it in my cycle journal, like
Yes. Yes.
bleeding and weeding
And
again.
weeding.
Yeah. So I would love to just redirect us, I guess. I want to go kind of back to what we were talking about a little bit at the start and just deepen a little bit more. Just I'm really fascinated, so you were talking about, deep like testing on your hormones, and then the work you do is very much through nourishing for hormone health. So, you know, we've talked about these being like these two aspects, like the divine feminine within and connecting to ourself, and kind of appreciating, connecting that presence with our blood and our, like, that mindfulness practice. But then back on the kind of hormone health level, and we've talked about, you know, how our bodies and our cycles change and we don't always ovulate, and how that can affect the hormonal profile as well. I'd really love to just ask you, you know, as a nutritionist, you know, are there some things that you're just noticing that we collectively have forgotten in terms of food, like that food is medicine? I feel like we're really disconnected from that. And yeah, I just really want to hear you kind of speak to that, and you know, how we can be really more mindful, you know, without going into specific details, I guess, because everyone's different. But how can we really come back to that awareness of food being really healing for hormone health?
Yeah. So I think the first thing that was coming through is we have given away a lot of our power around food and food choices, not only in how food is obviously manufactured and all of that, because we really truly don't know what's going on until these horrific documentaries come to the surface and you watch them and you just think, oh my goodness, okay. So there's that element of disempowerment, but there's also, we no longer trust ourselves to make the right decisions for us. And that's why I love menstrual cycle nutrition, because it's going back to the wisdom of your cycle and your hormones and your moods to help you. You know, it actually, it's quite simple. I mean, I'm saying this and I'm probably like, I could be out of a job, because it's not, it's actually quite simple. You know, if we reconnect with our own messages. And I think, especially, again, you know, anyone with a menstrual cycle and who has experienced cravings and sometimes felt out of control, we are the most likely people to hand our power over to experts, or you know, people who have healed themselves or whatever, or a doctor, right? Or anything, any person giving us a message around food choices. So unfortunately, I think a lot of it has been that we no longer trust ourselves around making these food choices. Cravings have this terrible reputation for being something that we have to resist, and we have to be strong and pull in the willpower and all of that. All those words are so uncyclical, you know.
Yeah, and really shaming.
Really, really shaming. Again, let's go back to the what's wrong with me, right? Question. It's like, what's wrong with me? And I have a couple of really core messages that I put out quite regularly on my social media, and I reinforce like all the time with my clients. And that's like, we're not meant to eat the same at every phase of the cycle. We are meant to, actually, physiologically, we are meant to eat more calories at certain points in the cycle. Most definitely in inner autumn, that late luteal, we need almost 200 more calories. Now, I hate counting calories, or it's not what I do, but that message really resonates with a lot of women, because they come from calorie counting background, mothers in the 80s who used to do the calorie, I mean, there's all of this. A lot of people have Fitbits. That's another calorie counting device that we're aware of. And so when you put it in a language that people understand, or that resonates very deeply, even from like family patterning, it's like, oh, really, I am meant to eat more. And I'm like, yeah. So, not embrace it, but like step into that and eat more, because we need to eat more. And it's just trust that if you eat more in that week before your bleed, you will probably not want to eat so much a couple of weeks after. And it's just bringing that in. I think that's probably a really real core message, is trust the cycle to guide you on your choices. Trust the cycle to, if you want to eat that chocolate, just, okay, let's, there's better quality chocolate sometimes. But even then, like, if you really want to eat that really cheap, crappy chocolate on that one day, then just eat it, because you've got it out. It's just, and you move on. So for me, it is a lot about just coming back to our wisdom that we really, really do hold inside of us, and really, again, creating the space to tap into that and go, what do I need today? I mean, I have created reams and reams of menus and recipes for every stage of the cycle, but you don't even sometimes need that. That's a great reference point. But, sometimes you wake up and you're like, oh, today is definitely like a massive breakfast day. You know what I mean? And I'm gonna pile all of the things in, and actually I'm gonna have a 3-course breakfast because I am feeling that ravenous hunger. And then you address it early on in the day, everything's happy, your blood sugar is stable, and that's it. And it's not the issue anymore. Do you see what I mean? So, and then there are days, the smoothie days, I call them, or the juice days, when you're like, oh, I really just want a smoothie today. But the problem, not the problem, but one of the common things I see is we always want to be in a smoothie day because that's what we've been conditioned to think is, like the right day. So, and I used to do this a lot. I used to ask myself, why can't I always want to eat like this? Again, before I understood about the cyclical whole living mentality and what was happening to me physiologically, it was, well, what's wrong with me? Like, for example, 2 days before my bleed, why can't I have a green smoothie for breakfast today and feel satisfied? I felt fine a week ago, like, what's wrong with me that I can't have it today? There's nothing wrong with you. Like, it's just your blood sugar is different. Your insulin is behaving differently. You have a need for something that's going to ground you, and we need more calories. So that green smoothie, of course, it's not going to be the thing that fills your soul today. Like, far from it.
I feel so seen and heard by you. Thank you. Yeah, I really noticed that as well. And my husband's he's like, oh, I'm going to go back into I'm going to have smoothies again, or, I'm going to do, he sort of doesn't really, but he kind of talks sometimes about doing, like intermittent fasting and like all this stuff. And he's like, and I just go, it's like, we do it with me. I go, no, no, not even going to play that game because I mean, that's up to him, right? But he's a man in a man's body, and his physiology is entirely different. And I don't want to do that. Like, I love having the idea of not eating until like midday. To me, just feels so wrong. Like, I love a big breakfast. It just feels so. It's like my ritual. Like, I like to do that. And like you say, sometimes I feel like eating more, and sometimes I don't. But I really love that reminder that. I think that's particularly a time I can just imagine that if we're shaming ourselves and judging and criticizing ourselves going in that premenstrual phase of, oh, I'm really hungry, or I need to eat more, or why am I eating so much? Like, that's just feeding the beast, like the critic, that judgment, that kind of, or the mood, the the PMS, for want of a better word. What do we call it? Please more space.
Please make space.
Please make space. Yeah. Please make space and give yourself permission to do what you need and to eat what you need and care for yourself as you need. Like, and if you don't do that, you're just going to invite the beast. It's going to make it worse, right?
Yeah. And one of the things I love doing with my clients is when we get to that like premenstrual, I'm like, okay, challenge. Can you put together the most nourishing meal you can think of? I want you to finish this meal and feel so full and so satisfied that you literally, you're not overfull as in like feeling sick, but you feel, that beautiful feeling when you're like, that's what I want you to do. And I don't want you to worry about what's going in the meal. We brainstorm sometimes, like, what would that look like? And it's like all these things. And there's quite often a lot of cacao and maybe like brown rice or oats or these kind of, or sweet potato. And we just come up with this, or a crazy smoothie, like a warming one that's just like so filling, that completely changes everything, because there's no longer resistance. It's like you open it all up and you're like, yes. And you realize that the minute that you open it up, like, we all have this fear. We don't trust ourselves. We've been told for so many years by the wellness and the diet industries that we're not to be trusted, right? To make our own nutritional decisions. That's why you need to follow this, or you need to follow that. Something very interesting happens when you truly allow yourself to create the biggest, most filling meal you've ever done. 9 times out of 10, it is so nourishing and it contains so many wonderful ingredients. It's not the McDonald's. And you know what? If it is, that's also okay. Maybe that's what you need at that point. But all of a sudden you're like, oh, I've had a big meal, and actually it hasn't opened the floodgates, because we're
Yeah.
being conditioned to think that it opens the floodgates. And once you have that one big meal, that's it, you're going to spiral. It's a real story, with the diet industry of,
Mm.
oh no, like once you start like that, you're going to be craving food all the time, blah, blah, blah. And actually it has the complete opposite, because it has completely changed your brain chemistry, and you're no longer suppressing this need just to eat a bit more. You're like, I'm done. I actually don't want to
Mm.
eat anymore, but not from a place of I'm over full, but just like I'm just incredibly satisfied and just, I'm good. And that is like a huge shift for so many of us, when you're like, oh yeah, like, let's do this. Let's create this huge, nourishing, delicious meal.
I'm gonna play with that next time
Yes.
I'm in that phase of my cycle. What's the most delicious, nourishing meal that I can come up with? I think that's beautiful. I think it's fascinating that, hearing you say that it comes down to like needing permission. Like
Yeah.
can we not give it to ourselves? Do we have to look outside for that?
Yeah.
And yeah, it's I think it's really important, this education and this reframe that you're giving to people. It's so empowering, because you're right. Like, I I've always liked my food. I always eat plenty, and I sort of just
Mm,
don't really worry about it. But
mm,
I can see a lot of people really struggling with what they eat and how they eat, and worrying about
mhm.
how that links with hormones. The stories, like, as you
Yeah.
approach perimenopause and menopause, your digestion slows down, and you're just going to pack on weight and things like that.
Yeah.
Like that's true to a point, isn't it? But like, I'm sure that doing a lot of the hormone work, hormone health now, before you get to that
Mm,
that that phase of life as well, is going to be really
yeah.
supportive for long-term health. Would that be fair to say?
Yes, absolutely. Starting the work as soon as we can,
Mm,
basically, is important. But also, I feel that menopause is one of these big invitations to stop pushing. Like we
mm,
have to, like pushing in terms of what we're eating, pushing in terms of our stress levels, all of this. And yeah, it's, oh my gosh, there's so much to say here. So I have to just kind of take a minute to pause and
mm,
think about where we're going to go with this, because yes, there are physiological changes taking place. They
mm,
really are. And we do become more sensitive to blood sugar. But the way to approach it is with deep, deep love and
mm.
deep, just like focusing on nourishment. Like it's hard when your body starts changing and you have been doing the same things your whole life, like, oh gosh, like rewriting the menopause story is another big one, another very, very
Yeah,
big one,
definitely. Mm,
which I feel that, is happening more and more. But it's focusing on nourishment, and in a way trying to, again, because it's the what's wrong with me, I'm eating like this, I'm cutting back on calories, yet my waistline is still expanding, because
mm,
it will expand to a point. But we have got so many messages hitting us, the worst thing that can happen to you as a woman, like that is like the ultimate sign of just, like failed at life. And the medical profession also really goes on about this, because obviously, like, if you do have a lot of fat around your middle, you could potentially be more predisposed to heart disease, to diabetes, and all of these things. So it's a double making you feel like shit, right? It's like
mm,
the kind of like body image, all of this aging kind of narrative, and then the medical narrative. So you might be kind of like restricting your food more and more, but that belly is still getting a little bit bigger. You're doing the more exercise. I mean, how that makes you feel, like really, like at your core,
mm,
like a total failure, right? And all the
mm,
health concerns, you've got the image concerns. So I'm always like, we come back to love. We come back to love, and we nourish ourselves with love. And, we eat in a really beautiful way, but we don't cut anything out, and we understand what's happening, and we support that. And if there's little, I actually gave a menopause talk yesterday to a group of women at Kingston Hospital who, it was great talk. And, I nutritionally, I know there's little bits and bobs we can do. So let's focus on that, and let's focus on what we can put in, and let's enjoy that, But it is a very, very challenging time because of, I think, all the noise around us. And, there's part of me, and I was thinking about this recently, like, I really want to start standing up a little bit for the big bellied woman, the apple shaped woman, because like genetically, I'm an apple shaped woman. I come from a family where heart disease actually is rife and high blood pressure is rife. And I have that predisposition. And people always say, oh, you can, it's not your genes, it's your lifestyle, blah, blah, blah. Let me tell you something. Sometimes those genes are very, very strong, right? So don't beat yourself up if those genes are still expressing themselves to a point, because they will. So, don't, it's about doing everything you can and educating yourself. So for me, I check my blood pressure every 2 or 3 months, because I'm like, okay, this is something that could happen, so I want to keep an eye on it. I try and move as much as I can, but my belly is still expanding. I'm going to be 45 next month, and and it's not me being defeatist and going, oh well, it doesn't matter, I'm just going to,
let it all go, as they say.
Yeah. I'd be like, yeah,
God forbid.
So what, I'm going to drink all the wine and everything else, and it's not about that. But I I want to be compassionate with myself, and I cannot keep on, every time I look in the mirror, go, oh, fuck, you know what I mean? Like, there's all these like ratios, like if your waist is over 80 centimeters, then, oh my God, you're a heart attack on a walking heart attack, blah, 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 blah. And it's like, well, I show up as best as I can for my health and for my hormones. And I actually also work with my own nutritionist to guide me, because I can't do it all myself. And I'm doing everything I can with as much love and compassion as I can, but with an awareness that there are strong genetic components there, and that make, I probably will be one of those slightly apple-shaped women, and that's okay, like, and I'm aware of the risks to my health, and that's okay. And I don't want to have, and I admit, like, sometimes the whole, like, my lineage and with my mother, my grandmother, I'm like, oh, look at them. They were on blood pressure medication, and, oh, there was this and that. And there's like a resentment there. There's a kind of like, oh, why have you got those genes? I don't want, and there's this resistance and resentment, and I don't want to be in that place. So I have to find some kind of love for everything, including the predisposition to all of these things. And I have to find my happy medium, and I have to still navigate it all, and I have to shut out some of these noises, because otherwise I'm going to wake up every morning and go, oh, look at you, like, and I think now it's even worse, because there's this huge emphasis on the pear shape, like every woman in the world wants the tiniest waist and the biggest bottom, and then all us poor little apples are in one corner. Like, so ashamed of our shape, because medically we're also, it's like, oh, look at you're predisposed to heart attacks and diabetes and blah blah blah, and you're like, oh, but I'm doing what I can, but so I feel that that's going to be more of a conversation that I'm going to be having as well, to be honest with you, this new unshaming the apple. And
I love that. Yeah honoring the apple. Yes,
let's honor the apple.
I'm that shape too. I'm 100% that shape, and it's genetic with me. And I look at the body shapes of all the people in my family, and there's been times when I've been like, why can't I have, like, genes that made me like, the ideal human? And it's a lifelong thing of just coming to acceptance of that, and being like, it's redefining the beauty standards. But when you've not just got, like you say, you've not just got beauty standards, you've got health warnings being thrown at you. And that can start really young. When you're a teenager and you first go to the doctors, and they always make you get on the scales and tell you what your
Oh,
BMI is according to, and
oh,
it just sets us up with these relationships to our bodies that they're not fair. It's certainly not compassionate, and
no.
it's I think it's pretty harmful. So I really love what you're
Mm,
saying about I love that you gave this talk to at the hospital yesterday on menopause, and that this is in your future with your work and everything you're doing. I just love so much that it's really inviting women into a better relationship
mm,
with their
mm,
feminine, with their not just with their body and their health, but all of them, embracing all of that,
mhm.
and doing what you can, but lots of self-love. It's really
Yeah,
special work.
yeah. And that, I think that's in a nutshell, right? Do what you can. We can always bring in another vegetable. We can
Mm,
always, we can do that side, but we always do, it's from a place of love. And when we don't eat the other vegetable, that's okay too. And it's this kind
mm,
of just like navigating it all with just compassion. Especially the nutrition world can be very, very dogmatic, and that I felt a lot of discomfort in that world in the past. So like I really find that because of I've this deeper cyclical work, I've really found my voice, and
mm,
I've found a space where I feel comfortable supporting women and hormone health, because it is this very fine, because some women will come to me and we do a test and they are estrogen dominant and they're like, tell me all of the things, I want to do everything to. And I'm just like, okay.
mm-hmm.
Yes, lovely, but can we just do a little pivot and do this from a place of more love, more compassion, and rather than let's do all of the things for a month and then feel really hungry because we haven't eaten enough protein or enough fats because you've just been going crazy on the broccoli or something, like that, the kind of,
Mm,
let's
yeah.
just do that little, like, loving thing. And of course we could always aim to bring in all these wonderful hormone balancing foods, but I think also if we're approaching it like that, think about what this is doing to like our nervous system, when we're eating from this place of rigidity and like, like that's also not going to be serving our hormone health. There's a whole other set of issues there as well.
Yeah. It reminds me of what you just said earlier on. It's when you do that, you're eating from a place of restriction, whereas what you were saying was, what can we add in, like adding in rather than
Yes.
taking out. Like, I think that's a really important
Yeah, absolutely.
frame.
And the more you add in, the less time and actual physical space you have in your diet to put in the other stuff. You just don't. So
Mm.
yesterday, one of the questions at the end of the talk was, what's the one thing we can do? They very much, and I loved that because they were really involved. And I was like, I'm a big, big fan of eating a portion of vegetables before every meal. That is a game changer in terms of hormones, in terms of blood sugar, and I was like, just do that one portion of veg before every meal. And, I've been doing this for quite a while, and it's incredible the knock on effect that has, because honestly, by the time you've had that leafy salad or that bowl of broccoli, there's no way you're going to get to the end and go, oh, I'm still hungry, oh, what can I have? You literally are, I'm actually done, whereas a lot of our habits are usually like going straight to like, oh, there's a bowl of crisps here or chips, and eat all that first. And then you look at the broccoli, I mean, done it millions and one times. And I'm like, yeah, I don't want any broccoli now, So, but
Totally.
you've brought in the goodness. So you're just like, yeah, it's a huge, huge shift, and you don't even think about then raiding the fridge later on, because you are so satisfied and your body has received all that fiber, all those phytonutrients, all of the goodness, and your brain is like, yeah, we're good. So
That's a brilliant tip. I'm definitely going to take that on board. Thank you for sharing.
oh, you're welcome.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, my mind's just like, you know, ticking over because I know that my kids will be into that as well.
Yeah.
They love vegetables actually. Not all vegetables, but
Mm.
it's interesting how before they get sort of conditioned into reaching for all the crappy snacks, they actually just really like the vegetables.
Yeah.
Mm,
Yeah.
mm. So
Yeah, I mean, that's a whole other, don't get me going on children's menus and things like
yeah,
that. Like,
exactly right.
don't,
Yeah.
because that's another full entire podcast episode. But yeah, like children instinctively allowed to just kind of explore and given options will, yeah, they'll love it. And it's interesting. It's sometimes, I know quite a lot of children personally who loved vegetables and then went into the school system or whatever, and they saw their friends eating all the crap, and they'd be like, yeah, I don't want any more vegetables. And you're
Yeah.
like, what do we do? Isolate them forever? No, you can't. But
Absolutely. Yeah.
yeah,
Brilliant. I'm going to go and take that tip, and I'm going to go and make that happen tomorrow. Thank you so
yes,
much. Thank you
you're
so much for
welcome.
an amazing conversation. I've really loved chatting with you about all of these beautiful ways that we can honor ourselves and care for ourselves and our hormone health and our bodies and our relationship to our cyclic nature as well. Thank you so much.
You're so welcome. Yeah, really welcome. It's been such a pleasure.
Thank you. So where can people find you if they want to connect with you? I've got you're on Instagram at hormones_in_harmony.
Yes.
And your website as well, hormonesinharmony.co.uk. Is there anywhere else people can find you?
No, because I like to keep my energy focused in a couple of areas. And, you know, I'm honoring that now. So Instagram, website, or you can just email me. Like, you know, I want to keep my energy, preserve that and be boundaried with it. So, yeah, those are the two places you can find me. And, you know, I've said I'm boundaried my energy, but I love connecting with anyone who wants to reach out. So don't ever feel shy about sending me a DM or an email. Anything that you've listened to today that you've gone, ooh, I want to know more. Please get in touch, because this is how we spread the ripple, right? And this is how the change just happens at that level. So yes.
Beautiful. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you so much for listening in. If you're loving this podcast and you'd love to help me spread the wisdom shared, please leave a review or rating, or share this with somebody who you think would love to listen in. I'm really passionate about creating ripples of change and getting this information to more women, girls, and people with a cycle so that they can reclaim their cyclic natures too. And if you'd love to dive in deeper with learning more about how to connect with your cycle and rites of passages, come and join our free Wild Flow Circle community, or choose a course and learn with me on my online learning hub. All the links are in the show notes. And until next time, be well and go with the flow of your cyclic nature.